American writer and philosopher Ralph Waldo Emerson. No, not him. Nope, not that either. Close enough. Ralph Waldo Emerson said that speech is power, speech is to persuade, to convert, to compel. Even though we know the strength that the spoken word holds, year after year surveys prove that public speaking is among people's most prevalent fears. There's even a standard nightmare of having to do a presentation or a speech in your underwear. But why is this the case? What exactly makes public speaking so scary? Humans are social creatures. We usually love talking, especially when talking about something that we care about. But there's something about the vulnerability of speaking in front of strangers that makes people nervous. But that doesn't need to be the case. Instead of being scared of the idea of getting up and delivering a speech, let's try to understand why those fears exist and how to overcome them by properly preparing. The first step in writing a presentation is to figure out your topic. Hopefully, you get a lot of leeway to decide what your speech is going to cover. Even if you are given the topic by your instructor, that doesn't mean that you can't have some influence on the material. Typically, what I like to do is work in some jokes. That allows me a chance to personalize the presentation and insert some of myself into it. When you feel a connection to the material, other people can see that, and it makes the presentation more interesting for you and your audience. Now it's time to start organizing your speech. You can do this in the form of an outline. Outlines serve many purposes when writing a speech. First, it makes it easier to organize the order of your presentation, to make sure that it has a logical flow and isn't all over the place, making it very difficult to follow. Outlines help to keep your presentation from being lopsided. You don't want one of your sections to have 10 subpoints and another to have 2. So take some of those larger portions and split them up into multiple smaller points. Outlines also give you direction on how to set up your visual aids. This can be very beneficial when you are learning your transitions from one point to another or from one slide to another. Transitions are typically the wonkiest parts of a speech and the part that can trip people up the most. A good outline supported by well thought out visuals can help you make sure that you don't inadvertently skip part of the presentation and potentially miss vital information. After you have a good outline, the next step is to write a script. If you are going to practice a speech several times, you may as well think of the best words to convey your information and arguments. That's really all a script is. Planning out the exact way that you want to talk about your topic. Scripts let you avoid tongue twisters or clumsy parts of speech because you can plan a better and clearer way of saying something. Make sure that you pay attention to how much time you have for your presentation. Typically, you will need 100 to 120 words for every minute that you are going to speak. Any more words than that, and you will run the risk of speaking too fast and leaving your audience behind. Scripts also allow you to plan out detailed subjects and the best way to present them. For a general presentation, don't be afraid to be detailed. Don't just assume that the audience shares your pool of knowledge. Show your work and how you get to the conclusion that you are making. A more specialized presentation can make some assumptions about the level of expertise that the audience may have on a topic. For instance, if you're speaking to a room full of chemists, you can assume that they have at least some knowledge on chemistry. A good presentation should have a conversational tone. It should make your audience feel more like a participant and less like people who got suckered into a timeshare or a multi-level marketing pitch. Start by asking a broad question and then work through the answer in a detailed manner. This plays an important role in making the presentation more dynamic and interesting. You don't want to talk at people, but rather talk with people. By working through the rhetorical question, you are also giving the audience a chance to work through the problem with you. This leads to a Eureka moment. For example, if I told you that my dog only barks when he's hungry, and he's not barking right now, well, then you can assume that he must not be hungry. Although maybe that's not the best example because my dog is always hungry. Eureka moments serve a few purposes. First, they are a wonderful way to make your presentation more memorable. People are more likely to retain information that they come up with on their own rather than information they are just told. The audience will remember better if they are the ones connecting the dots. Secondly, a Eureka moment makes the presentation more engaging. When you ask someone a question, you are asking them to engage with the subject matter. Engagement is key to understanding. Otherwise, people just let everything go in one ear and out the other. You aren't giving these presentations just for your own health or to hear your own voice. I mean, I do, but most normal people don't. Another way to engage with the audience is to use a call to action. This means asking the audience to leave the presentation with knowledge of what they can do to solve the problems that you've pointed out. This can be something as simple as asking people to volunteer in their communities or to improve their own lives. Calls to action turn your message into a mission. Another technique is to dispel contrarian arguments in the case you're making. Mention the objection and in a sentence or two explain why it isn't a valid argument. The term for this is prebunking, and it works on the theory that you can inoculate someone against misinformation by heading it off and presenting the correct argument first. It's human nature to be competitive, and one of the manifestations of that competitiveness are debate and arguments. But we only have so much attentive capacity. I struggle with this a lot myself. When I hear something that doesn't make sense to me or rings as false, I tend to fixate on it. I come up with arguments that seek to poke holes in the speaker's argument instead of continuing to listen to where they are going and what the intent of the statement was. We tend to overestimate our own capacity for understanding. I would compare it to the way that people evaluate their own driving skills. 73% of drivers believe that they are better than average drivers, and that number goes up to 80% for men. But logically, half of the drivers on the road should be below average. This dissonance can be very difficult to overcome. As one of my coworkers used to say, everyone thinks that they're Goku, but most of us are really just Krillin. We briefly touched on visual aids earlier. They're incredibly helpful both for you and your audience. Visual aids help the audience take good notes on your presentation and makes sure that they get all of the important parts. But you need to make sure that you're using your visuals as aids and not as a crutch. You may be getting ready to do a presentation and your visuals may not work. This is where proper preparation becomes key. You need to be able to pivot and be able to respond to unforeseen circumstances. I mean, let's be honest. How often have you had a project go off without a hitch? The next issue with relying too much on visual aids is that it can become the focus of your presentation. You can't allow yourself to fall into the trap of just reading PowerPoint slides or cramming too many slides into your slide deck or too much information on each slide. Limit how many words you use on each slide. Don't have a bunch of wordy slides, or else your audience is going to be reading your slides instead of listening to you. Once your script and visuals are all laid out, it's time to practice, practice, practice. Now, how much you're going to need to practice is going to depend on what kind of presentation you are going to give. If you're going to record the presentation, you won't need to practice as much. You can edit out any parts that you mess up on. You can read it directly off the script. You can try it over and over again until you end up with something that's really good. I would say that you would still want to read through the entire presentation 3 to 4 times before you sit down to record it, so that you can start to imagine in your head the way that you want everything to sound. If you are presenting in person, then rehearsals become incredibly important. A big part of an effective rehearsal is to practice the presentation the exact way that you plan to present it, including gestures, facial expressions, and most importantly, vocal intonation. Make sure that you specifically rehearse any portions with tricky wording or data. Get that phrasing so ingrained in your mind that you just say it over and over again with the exact same delivery, almost like a reflex. Really focus on rehearsing your transitions from point to point and from paragraph to paragraph. Author Malcolm Gladwell expressed his idea on mastering a subject in his 10,000 hours theory. The gist of it is that when you've done an activity for 10,000 hours, that is 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, 44 weeks per year for 5.5 years, you will have become an expert at it. 5.5 years of doing carpentry will make you a better carpenter at the end of it. It's the literal definition of practice makes perfect. You don't actually need to get to 10,000 hours to be good at doing presentations, but if you did, you'd probably be very, very good at them. Just as important as what you are going to say is how you plan to say it, both verbally and non-verbally. Try to develop a good stage presence before you get up to give your speech. Don't sway or pace around like a mopey zoo lion. Keep your hands out of your pockets. That advice is mostly for the men, as women's clothes don't have pockets. Many times there may be a podium or a lectern nearby. While these are perfectly fine for certain types of presentations, a general speech is likely going to be better received if you are standing in front of the podium instead of hiding behind it. Being familiar and well practiced in your material is also a big contributor to having a good stage presence. So it's presentation day. What can we do to make our presentation as impactful as possible? Arrive early. This is for a few reasons. First, it gives you a chance to set up your visuals. Test them out. Make sure that everything's working properly. This way, if it isn't working, you will be very thankful to have extra time to troubleshoot. I also like to bring backups. I usually bring my laptop, an HDMI adapter and cable, and at least 2 flash drives with my presentations. Another helpful thing that you can bring with you is a bottle or a cup of water. When you're talking for a long time and really projecting and enunciating every word, you're going to get dry mouth. Your voice is going to get a little raspy and froggy. Having something to sip on can alleviate this. And you don't want soda or anything fizzy or bubbly that might make a burp get caught up in your throat. Mint chewing gum is pretty helpful too. Chew it up about 10 minutes before your speech, and that will help clear out your sinuses and get your jaw and your tongue loose. Just make sure that you remember to spit the gum out before you actually get started. One thing you do not want to bring with you is your script. If you are speaking with your full script laid out in front of you on a podium, it's going to be very difficult to avoid reading off of it. If you want to bring something other than your visual aids, a small index card or a piece of paper with your outline and key phrases is perfectly acceptable. This should be able to guide you through the presentation and jog your memory on which part is next. Thank you for watching this Odessa College workshop.